More on one of our top stories now, a new study shedding light on urban heat here in Singapore. The study maps heat spots in the city centre, with temperatures reaching up to 6 degrees higher than those rural areas.
From all this, we have with us Mr. Tony Chan. He is Associate Principal for Cities and Planning in Singapore from sustainability consultancy Arup. Mr. Chan, earlier my colleague Clara went to the hottest and coolest places in Singapore. The hottest, Telok Ayer, she said her reasons is because the high-rise buildings block the cooling effect from the nearby coastline. Also, the roofs, she said, were dark terracotta, and that has made the whole area hotter. Now, what are some of the other things in these, apart from things like roofs, high-rise buildings, that can trap heat in a place like Singapore?
So there's obviously a lot of different criteria that would contribute towards urban heat. I think the standard requirements and things like materials, building density, more population within the area. I think what she highlighted was also that urban canyon effect, when air movements are blocked off by higher buildings and more dense buildings, that all contributes towards the increasing urban heat we are seeing as well.
So we're looking at all of these buildings. They're built differently, different materials are being used. We've got this canyon effect going on as well. What is the potential for existing infrastructure or the built-up environment to be cooled down?
Yeah, I think there's always that play between built-up areas and what opportunities exist within built-up areas. I think you're seeing Singapore, which is actually pretty built up with a very dense environment. But a lot of opportunities also exist within built-up environments. How we are going to retrofit existing buildings when things get demolished and built up, opportunities exist. Whether we are greening the roofs, I think one of the studies we are doing in London is also looking at reflective solar PVs on all the rooftops for a certain part of London to see whether this contributes towards lowering the heat effect as well for the city.
Oh, you've preempted my next question. Essentially, you have looked at other cities, and it would be very foolish not to do that.
Sure.
Relative to these other cities, London being just one of them, how does Singapore rate in terms of our efforts to naturally cool ourselves, to make the best use of what we have in terms of natural resources?
Sure. I think Singapore is really doing great things. I think part of the Singapore Green Plan, I think you're seeing initiatives like Cooling Singapore. We're building the digital urban climate study, which all adds to the body of knowledge to help us implement strategies moving forward in terms of mitigating against heat as well. So I think learnings from Singapore, although quite unique geographically in terms of the humidity and the tropical climate, I think lessons learned here we can actually apply to many cities, especially around Southeast Asia as well.
Right. So, Mr. Chan, talking about other cities, we find that in Cairo and New York, we find that to be the case. So we're going to pull up some data from your study here. Bulaq ad-Dakror, that is the hottest spot in Cairo, and it has no vegetation, no water. It's 6 degrees Celsius warmer than the coolest spot, and that's in the south of Kosaria Island. That's about 60% covered by nature. New York, meantime, that's the hottest spot is in Washington Heights, with barely any vegetation. It's 4.5 degrees warmer compared to Ferry Point Park. That area is the coolest spot, where there's almost 80% of that area covered by nature, by plants and trees, I suppose. So these cooler spots have about 80% vegetation and water combined. So is it really a matter of having more water, more vegetation? I mean, does it matter the density of that vegetation and the amount of water as well?
Yeah, you have all these interplaying factors that contributes towards urban heat. I think it's not directly fair to compare cities because each city will be unique. The circumstances are unique. The climatic conditions are unique. I think you're seeing Ferry Point Park in New York is also surrounded by water. So that has a cooling effect on the cities as well. So I think what this sort of digital tools help us is understanding all these interplaying factors that contributes towards urban heat and how we can reduce the heat a lot further as well.
Oh, I speak of all these interplaying factors. Of course, research into this, the body of knowledge is not static. For everything that you do and study and resolve, it then creates new research questions for someone like yourself. So in terms of what we need to be looking at next for research using available technology, what's next?
Well, it's certainly exciting times. I think as planners, it's challenging time. Climatic conditions are changing and times are uncertain. We're also tracking how urban heat might increase. I think what's interesting is, given the available data, computing power is also increasing. That's allowing us to use these tools to analyze all these different factors together, then allowing us to make sure that we design cities more sustainably in the future as well. So I think for us, Singapore is already looking at this using the digital twin. Even for our models, we're looking at how we can improve the accuracy of the model a lot more, how we can integrate into other 3D city design models, and hence making sure that we lower carbon emission, we lower urban heat, allowing us to design cities much better in the future.
So you have a lot on your plate, Mr. Chan. It seems to me that you need a lot of policy action and appropriate policy action as far as this is concerned, but also a lot of investment as well. Sure. Does the sector need a bigger push in terms of the funding that is going to go into this urban planning?
Yeah, I think the interesting bit for our organization, at least, is being 100% employee-owned. We do put money aside for research and development. I think what's interesting is tools such as this allow us to understand the situation much better. We're looking at mitigating strategies to allow us to ensure that any design we do for cities in the future, we are mitigating against heat and other sustainability objectives. I think what's important, as you outlined, is also making sure that we have the right policies in place. We push out the right guidelines to make sure that we guide future developments to design cities much better.
All right, thanks for coming in this evening. Mr. Tony Chan, Arup's Associate Principal for Cities and Planning in Singapore.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.